Edwin Valero was the kind of fighter who came around once in a lifetime. Undefeated with a record of 27 wins, every single one by knockout.
Valero sparred Pacquiao. Valero hit the hardest? More than Manny?
Harder than Manny, stronger than Manny. Manny was fast.
Fans called him Dynamite because he didn't just win, he destroyed. Inside the ring, he was fearless.
I've seen Canelo here, I've seen Alvarez here, I've seen Victor Ortiz here, I've seen a lot of fighters here. One fighter that came in this gym was Edwin Valero. What do you remember from him and his training regimen? 26-0, 26 knockouts. 27-0, 27
He was killing my bag. I'm like, really? The little guy can hit that hard? He was a monster.
Relentless, unstoppable. But outside, his life was spinning out of control in ways no one really saw coming. How does someone go from a national hero to the man who took the life of his own wife and then his own? This is a story about glory, yes, but it's also about pain, hidden battles, and the devastating consequences of trauma left unchecked.
If I'm wrong, but I heard that he would throw thousands of punches with no break, just go 30, 40 minutes with no break.
It's true.
How do you do that physically?
I don't know, man. He was different. He was different.
Valero's life seemed perfect, yet beneath the surface, something dark was brewing. Stay with me as we dig into the rise and tragic fall of a champion whose greatest fight was never in the ring. What really brought down Edwin Valero? Picture this, a packed arena, the lights dimmed, the roar of the crowd growing louder. And then, out of the darkness, Edwin Valero steps into the ring. At that moment, you know you're watching something raw, something almost untamed. Valero wasn't just another boxer, he was a force of nature, a fighter with a perfect record. 27 wins, 0 losses, and here's the kicker. Every single one of those wins was a knockout. Now let's talk about that. In boxing, it's rare to see anyone with that kind of knockout power. But Valero, he made it look easy. They called him El Inca and Dinamita, or Dynamite.
First time you saw him, we were like, what am I looking at?
That's the first fighter and probably the only one who came to the gym in a limo.
Because he exploded in the ring, unleashing ruthless aggression. Opponents couldn't just outfight him, they had to survive him. And for most, that was simply impossible. Coming out of Venezuela, Valero quickly became a hero. He was fierce, he was unpredictable, and fans adored him. Every time he entered the ring, people knew they were in for a show. He'd throw punch after punch, relentless, almost reckless, like he had nothing to lose. And his opponents, they were left battered and beaten, no matter how tough they were. To the fans, he was like a gladiator, fighting with a passion that was unmatched.
The power, the power that he had was just insane. He'd hurt you with just landing punches in your arms.
Valero's style was something that made him both thrilling and terrifying. He had a unique mix of speed and power, but it was the way he seemed to enjoy every hit, every brutal exchange. That's what drew people in. As his reputation grew, so did the hype. People were saying he could become the next big thing, maybe even go down in history alongside boxing legends. But then, the story takes a darker turn. Our champion boxer ended his life with a suicide in a jail. What could have brought down a champion with so much promise? Let's cover the whole story. Let's rewind to 2001, a year that would change everything for Edwin Valero. At the height of his youth and ambition, Valero was already building a name in boxing. But one day, a simple motorcycle ride turned his world upside down. He crashed, and it was bad. Valero suffered a fractured skull, a severe head injury that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Doctors found blood clots in his brain, warning that even the smallest blow to his head could be deadly. Most fighters would have stopped right there. But Valero, he pushed on, convinced he could keep fighting. After that accident, he wasn't the same. The damage to his brain affected his memory, his balance, even his personality. He had moments of confusion and bursts of aggression that were new, almost like he was wrestling with someone else inside his own mind. And even though he was in constant pain, he didn't want anyone to know. To the public, he was still that fierce, unstoppable warrior. But behind closed doors, he was fighting a whole new battle. against his own body and mind. The injury became a shadow over his career. Doctors in the US wouldn't clear him to fight. They saw him as a ticking time bomb and said it wasn't safe. But Valero couldn't accept it. Boxing was his life, so he looked elsewhere, fighting wherever he could: Mexico, Venezuela, Japan, places where he could still get into the ring, even if it meant risking everything. Valero was still winning, still knocking out every opponent. But underneath it all, he was haunted. It's like he was trying to prove something, to escape something. On the outside, he was still dynamite, an undefeated champ. But inside, he was a man carrying trauma, one that nobody could see but him. As Edwin Valero's career skyrocketed, his personal life started to spiral out of control. Outside the ring, Valero's behavior became unpredictable. There were fights in bars, heated arguments that could turn violent at any moment. His explosive charisma in the ring was starting to show itself in dangerous ways outside it too. Valero was turning to alcohol, sometimes drugs, trying to numb the pain, to quiet whatever was haunting him. But the substances only made things worse. Friends and family started to notice the changes. He'd lash out suddenly with no warning. And yet, despite his fame, despite the people around him, no one seemed able to stop this downward spiral. There was a darker side of fame here. How does someone so visible fall through the cracks? Maybe people just saw the undefeated boxer, the knockout king, and didn't want to get involved. But underneath, Valero was unraveling, slipping further and further away from reality, losing himself in the violence he once controlled so well. What happens when an unstoppable force like Edwin Valero loses control? How far can someone fall before someone reaches out, or before it's simply too late? In 2010, Edwin Valero's life reached a breaking point. This undefeated champion, this hero to so many fans, hit a dark and tragic end that no one could have predicted, or perhaps they just didn't want to see it coming. It all started to unravel in March, when Valero's wife, Jennifer Carolina, was hospitalized with bruises and a damaged lung. Valero claimed she'd simply fallen down the stairs, but her injuries told a different story. The authorities didn't believe him, but his wife eventually backed up his story, insisting it was an accident. Despite this, he was sent for 6 months of psychiatric treatment, a sign that those around him knew something was very wrong. But that intervention, it didn't come in time. Then on April 18th, just weeks later, the unthinkable happened. Valero was arrested after his wife was found dead in a hotel room in Valencia, Venezuela. She had been stabbed 3 times. According to reports, Valero himself admitted to the police that he'd killed her. The fighter who once seemed unstoppable, now held responsible for a horrific act that shook the boxing world to its core. And yet this tragedy wasn't over. The very next day, Valero was found dead in his jail cell, hanging by his pants. Just like that, he was gone. A tragic end to a man who had once seemed so invincible. His death was ruled a suicide, leaving everyone who followed his career in absolute shock. This moment sent waves through the world of boxing and beyond. Fans and friends were left grappling with the signs they might have missed, the warning signs, the cries for help that went unanswered. Here was a fighter who'd beaten everyone in the ring but lost to the battle within himself. Edwin Valero's story leaves us with so much to think about. Here was a fighter with everything, a flawless record, knockout power that thrilled fans, and a career that could have taken him to the very top. But as we saw, his greatest fight was the one happening inside him, and it was a battle he tragically lost. Valero's story reminds us of the price of untreated trauma. He endured so much: the brain injury from his accident, the psychological struggles that only seemed to grow with his fame. And as he climbed higher, it seems the pressure and pain only deepened. Boxing showed us his incredible strength, but his personal life showed us the fractures, the parts that fame couldn't fix. And he's not alone. In sports, and in boxing especially, how many athletes are fighting battles we can't see? The hits they take, the pain they bury, and the pressure they face to be unstoppable for the fans, for their legacy. Edwin's story is a tragic reminder that mental health in sports is not something we can ignore. Fame and victory may lift them up, but without support, their struggles can bring them crashing down. So here's a question. What does it mean to be a champion if one's life is lost in the process? Valero's story forces us to ask hard questions about the real price of greatness and what needs to change to prevent more tragedies like his. If you found this story moving or eye-opening, hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore more stories like this. We owe it to these athletes to look beyond the victories and see the full picture, the person behind the legend.